From the pages of the World Wrestling Federation magazine, here's updates.
Party people, in the place to be. What's going on? It's me. It's me. Yes, we're doing another one of these Undertaker Last Ride bits. Why? Because they just released another Undertaker Last Ride thing. So we're gonna do that. This one is more of a short Tales one. Tales from the Road, Tales from the Deadman, Tales from the Crypt Man, Tales from the Hood, whatever the hell you want to call it. It'll be in the title. You'll know what it is. But anyway, it's Tales from the Deadman. And this time, first thing I noticed when we're taking a look at this is that it's going to be cartoons to reenact some of these tales to help, better illustrate rather than just sitting around telling the stories. Okay, I can somewhat dig that. Next thing I noticed was that it said narrated by Timothy Olyphant. For those of you that don't know, Timothy Olyphant is an actor in Hollywood, best known for stuff as Deadwood and Justified, which is probably why they called him in to do this, because, Deadman persona, and also, he was also in the Santa Clarita Diet, which I watched, which was interesting. So, there it is. Timothy Olyphant is going to narrate some of the, at least in between the stories, to help set up the narrative. All the dead man's tales take place over the road, just like this story. Or, the dead man did this, just like this story. That sort of thing. It's kind of, we'll get to my grievance with them pulling him in to do this a little bit later on. The first thing they tell is the story of the Eggman's, of the Undertaker's arrival and him thinking he was going to be the Eggman from Survivor Series. This is not anything I haven't heard a million times before. I've heard the story. Taker comes in. Oh, they're doing this thing for Survivor Series 90. And I was like, oh, shit, they're going to call me in to be the Eggman, damn it. I don't want to be the Eggman. And Vince calls me up and he says, is this the Undertaker? And it took me a second to realize it was Vince, and that he said, yeah, boss, I'm the Undertaker. And that's the way that story goes. Heard it a bunch of times. It's interesting the first time I hear it, and there's, some interesting aspects to it. Obviously, that would go on to be Hector Guerrero's role, and, he went on to become the phenom that he was in the WWF. But it's nothing necessarily new. Then we move on to Madison Square Garden. Bloody hell, The Undertaker loves Madison Square Garden. This kind of made me want to go back and take a look, because they have a Madison Square Garden collection on the network of a lot of the shows that they did at Madison Square Garden that aired and ran for New York City specifically. So it almost makes me want to go back and take a look at a lot of those. And I might fuck around and do that. Right now, I'm in the middle of watching a whole bunch of SummerSlams, though, which is pretty interesting. I don't know if I'm going to do a video on that, but that's neither here nor there. Taker tells a story about how him and Paul Bearer were trying to keep the mystique of the character. So the way the garden is set up, when you go in with your rental car, and there are fans all around the entranceway where your car comes in. So they'll see you come in and out of the car, yada, yada, and they didn't want that for the Undertaker character, at least in the early days when they were doing it. So what they did was they went to a hotel that was close by. He said it was a Ramada. Went to the parking garage, waited around, got into an ambulance, and the ambulance drove them in, and nobody would see who they were in the ambulance. Well, apparently, the fans got wind of this a couple years into them doing it, and figuring out that that's how The Undertaker was getting into the arena. And so one day they all jam-packed this Ramada because they figure out that The Undertaker is going to be getting in that ambulance and going to the arena, and they got found out. And so Paul Bearer and Undertaker are out there signing autographs for people, as opposed to being in the ambulance and keeping the kayfabe and the mystique of the Undertaker character. Isn't that fun? Whiskey and hats. Yeah, we're gonna do some whiskey right here. As a matter of fact, I'm drinking Second Glance whiskey right now, American whiskey. Why? Because apparently they don't make cold cock anymore, or at least they don't sell it. That's a fucking shame. I loved cold cock. That was a fucking tasty goddamn whiskey. Fuck. Anyway, the Godfather and Taker in a room hanging out, like they are apt to do. And Godfather got a brand new hat, brand new Stetson hat. And he's, checking it out in the mirror. Whole lot of whiskey's been drunk at this point. He's checking it out in the mirror. He's saying, "Oh, this is a great hat." And Undertaker's like, "Man, that's a hell of a hat, man. I'm gonna have to give me one of them that looks just like that." It was a specific kind that either Taker had never seen before, or it was one that really caught his attention for whatever reason. He's like, "Man, that hat is fucking fantastic. I'm gonna give me one of them hats, man." And Godfather's like, "Hey, I'm gonna give you the hat." And Taker's like, "Nah, man, it's your hat. I don't need the hat." And Godfather's like, "No, man, take the hat. I'm gonna give you the hat." "Nah, man, it's your hat. I don't want the hat." Godfather's like, "Take the fucking hat." Taker's like, "I don't want the fucking hat." "Take the goddamn hat. I don't want the goddamn hat." I go back and forth with this, kind of tussling a little bit about the hat, trying to give each other the hat. "I don't want the fucking hat. You take the hat. No, you take the hat. No, you take the goddamn hat." Undertaker gives him the hat, runs into the bathroom. Godfather pounds on the door of the bathroom that Undertaker just locked, takes it off the frame. Give you the goddamn hat. Take the motherfucking hat." Undertaker turns to him, takes the door of this hotel room, pounds his head into the door, through the door. Undertaker's head goes through the door. Whiskey's a hell of a drug. Goes through the door. "I don't want the goddamn hat." Takes the door, flings it over the balcony on the outside. Thinks he's proved his point. He don't want the goddamn hat. Turns around. Godfather has channeled his inner hacksaw Jim Duggan. Ho! 3-point stance, tough guy. Boom. Big skirmish into the hotel room. They're battling. Godfather's got the Undertaker trapped in between the two beds, probably twin beds. You've been in a hotel, you know how that goes. Trapped in between the two beds. That's a relatively small space, and Undertaker's a relatively big guy, so he's kind of trapped in there. And Undertaker says, "Fine, I'll take the hat." At which point Godfather reaches over, grabs the hat that's been stepped and trampled on to all hell at this point, gives it to the Undertaker. Godfather replays that story for the audience and says, "The bottom line is he took the goddamn hat." Whew, drunk stories. That seems like one of those ones that even with this, listen, better story had you been there. Not a terrible story, because you get all these visuals and you get to, you think, about these two guys tussling over a hat and how stupid that is. And it brings you back to, maybe some stupid stuff that you and your friends have done, and some stupid friendly arguments, fake arguments, whatever, inside jokes you and your friends may have, or, however big it was. Apparently the Bone Street Crew, while the Clique was out there getting pilled the fuck up, Bone Street Crew was just drinking and fighting each other. It's almost like the APA, apparently. So that was an interesting story. Then we get Bruce Pritchard. I wouldn't believe any of this story if The Undertaker wasn't there to corroborate it. Never listen to Bruce Pritchard, kids. Never. Never, ever, 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 ever listen to Bruce Pritchard. He's one of the biggest bullshitters in all professional wrestling. One of the biggest. But they have The Undertaker there, side by side, corroborating the story, so okay. I believe The Undertaker's part. Bruce Pritchard tells a story of the early days of The Undertaker, where Bruce Pritchard's still managing him, his brother Love. They do one of his shows in Tennessee. Get the fuck out, because they want to get to the next town. Get the fuck out of Dodge. Want to get to the next town. They don't mention anything about keeping the mystique of The Undertaker, but they want to get the fuck out of Dodge. So they leave for the next town, but they get lost. This is the early days before GPS, before internet, before cell phones. Really, yeah. The only phones I think that were in existence in 1990 were the big Zach Morris brick phones, right? That cost thousands of fucking dollars. Come a long way in the cell phone technology. Anyway, Bruce Pritchard pulls up to a gas station. Taker's driving. Bruce Pritchard pull up to the gas station. Undertaker slumps down, trying to keep some kayfabe or whatever. Bruce Pritchard rolls the window down, sees a kid in the gas station. He's like, "Hey, can you tell us how to get back to the interstate?" This, that, or the other. The kid, leans over the car and is like, Oh, it might cost you a little something. I might be able to. Oh, my memory might be worked out for a little, for a Benjamin, for a president, for a dead president. You know what I mean? And here we go. And meanwhile, a couple of other kids, young punks, start circling around the car like they're gonna try to start some fucking trouble. Undertaker, thinking quickly, comes from the lean back position in his car to the full set up, turn, roll back the eyes. This kid apparently jumps back literally like he'd seen a ghost, because he'd seen a ghost. He'd seen a Deadman. He'd seen a Reaper of wayward souls. He'd seen a Lord of Darkness. He'd seen a Phenom. He'd seen the Undertaker. This kid, gets the best, most articulate, most in-depth directions on how to get back to the interstate in his entire life. He was like, I see the ghost. Gives the directions to Bruce Pritchard and runs the fuck away. His compadres had long since left him at this point. And that's that tale. Then we get a story of the flight from hell. Apparently, this was during insurrection, or at least on the way back from insurrection. Undertaker was in a triple threat match involving Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold did the running body press onto an opponent's back while he's on the draped across the ropes there, and Austin's knee brace scratched and tore the fuck up Taker's ear, top of Taker's ear. Now, Taker had the option of staying in England, getting his ear patched up, or going along with the boys to the charter flight, getting back home. He chose the charter flight, which was the flight from hell. So Taker's there, ear all bandaged up. He just wants to fucking get back to the States, get his ear patched up, whatever the fuck. He wasn't aware that Kurt Angle and Vince McMahon were play fighting. And by play fighting, I mean Vince McMahon trying to take Kurt Angle down. This was the same thing Kurt Angle did to Harley Race years earlier. He was trying to do the same thing to Kurt Angle now. They had fought to the point where there was like some rustling underneath the Undertaker's feet. Kurt Angle was on top of Vince McMahon, who was trying to take him down. Taker, in his, best dog friend protecting his owner mentality, doesn't, why is Kurt attacking Vince? Gets up, rear naked choke to Kurt Angle. Undertaker says Kurt's last words to him were, Taker, you're choking me out. All the boys are like, hey, no, they're just playing. Taker lets him go. Allegedly goes back to sleep. Wakes up, and all the aftermath of the fight from hell had happened. For those of you that don't know or aren't familiar with the flight from hell, you may not understand why I gave the air quotes. I actually gave the air quotes. Why I gave the air quotes when I talked about Taker sleeping through the rest of the flight. Kurt and Vince weren't the only guys fighting in that fight. Mr. Perfect and Mr. Brock Lesnar were also engaged in some entanglements. There was also a whole bunch of other shenanigans that happened on that flight. Hence the nickname, The Flight from Hell. I know, Taker's been through hell. Taker lives in hell. Taker's got a summer condo in hell. I get it. All the hyperbole. Fuck you. He's not sleeping through all that shit. You can't tell me Taker was asleep the rest of that flight. Taker may have tried to pass in and out. Taker may have wanted some sleep. Yada. They may have gone out of their way not to bother the Undertaker because of the respect and fear that they have for that man. But there is no way that even adjacent to all that stuff, he could have passed the fuck out. I don't give a fuck how powerful his headphones were. He damn sure didn't have no Ray-Bans back then, or Ray-Cons back then. He had Ray-Bans. He didn't have Ray-Cons back then. He didn't have no big fucking headphones back. What the fuck? Taker was not asleep through that flight. I don't believe that for a second. I believe Taker's trying to put himself adjacent to the fight from hell. He knows he was on it. He knows he had some participation in kind of what happened with the Kurt Angle thing, but he's trying to distance himself from whatever else happened on that flight from hell. Taker was at least awake for that fucking flight. There's no way Taker was asleep through that whole flight from hell. There's no way. There's no fucking way. Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. Come on. And meanwhile, then we get another story about the BSK Taker's group playing cards and dominoes, talking about how he and the crew were, in a hotel room, and Taker, not learning anything from his childhood, obviously, was sitting there playing with fire. Not learning anything. Parents died, burned my brother, thought to death, turns out to be alive, psychologically starved, fucking Paul Bear called my mom a whore. Didn't learn anything from his childhood and was playing with fucking fire. God damn it, Taker. Stop playing with fire. Didn't learn anything. Sitting there with a book of matches, flicking them, lighting them, flicking them at people. Mind you, thinking that by the time it reaches the person, it'll be hot, but it won't burn the shit down, is his line of thinking. Which turned out to be 99% true. There was 1% where it wasn't. Undertaker is flicking matches at people, flicks a match either at or over or around the vicinity of Yokozuna. Yokozuna was a big man. There was a lot of vicinity to be flicked at. Flicks it around Yokozuna. It lands behind Yokozuna in his hair. He sees smoke coming up. He says, Rod, turn around. Rod turns around. His hair's on fire. Everybody's putting him out. Beating the fuck out of him. Put him out. Yokozuna apparently laughs it off. He's a big, jovial big man. Ho, 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 Taker. That's that story. Then there's Wrestler's Court, which they try to pass off as lighthearted. I've heard stories that it wasn't always lighthearted for everybody. That it wasn't always a ho, 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 oh, we're just having fun, we're just breaking tension. Didn't somebody quit over Wrestler's Court? Weren't there fights in Wrestler's Court? Weren't there people that, legit fucking hated each other because of Wrestler's Court? Or hated each other worse as a result of Wrestler's Court? I've heard stories that it's not fucking all that lighthearted. It's not a fucking Three Stooges fucking short. It apparently, sometimes, you buy me a case of beer or whatever. Okay. Kayfabe the WWE network all you want to, but I've heard stories. We've all heard the stories. We've heard the stories. So anyway, they try to pass it off as lighthearted and end it with Xavier Woods giving Undertaker a gavel because he was the ad hoc judge of Wrestler's Court. More times than not, he was a judge of Wrestler's Court. So Xavier Woods gave him a gavel, judge Undertaker, and Undertaker brings it out. Says it's one of the better gifts he's ever gotten in his career, and he loves it. So that's it. That's all. There apparently ain't no more. There weren't more stories. There weren't more, deeper stories, better stories we haven't heard before. Of the list of stories that we're talking about, I haven't heard the MSG story. Actually, no. To be fair, the only stories I have heard about were the Eggman story, the Wrestler's Court, and the Flight from Hell. And I don't believe Taker's version of that one. So, alright. So there were some relatively new stories that I didn't necessarily hear before, but they weren't necessarily great or enthralling stories. They weren't necessarily like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened, or wow, that's very interesting, or oh wow, that's so funny. Arguably the best one may have been the Interstate story or the Godfather hack story, and those were super short. Those were amusements. Those weren't, I gotta sit down and review this that was meh. I mean, the cartoons were done okay, I suppose. They were done super quickly, super crudely, but you can get an atmosphere of what the atmosphere was, as opposed to just sitting there listening to somebody talk about it. You could see what was going on, very colorful, etc., etc. You can get sort of an idea of what was happening. Those are pretty good. I don't understand. This whole thing was 24 minutes. I don't understand. This video is going to be longer than that. I don't understand why they got Timothy Olyphant to do this. Why would they spend the money and the time to get, more importantly, the money to get an actor like Timothy Olyphant to come in and narrate this shit? What the fucking point was that? Why would they do it? What was the point? What was the fucking point? Why? You don't need to get Timothy Olyphant in there to narrate this shit because A, he's not that big an actor. Like, he's known. Like, if you saw his face, you'd be like, oh, that guy. But he's not like, oh my God, they got Johnny Cash back from the grave to narrate this shit. It was fucking a couple of road stories, mildly amusing at best, outright lying at worst. The Plane Ride from Hell and the Wrestler's Court stories, I call shenanigans on those. I call shenanigans on those stories. But what was the fucking point of that? What was the fucking point? I mean, I guess you got extra footage. This is a DVD. Like, if they had The Last Ride on a DVD set, this would be an extra. Meh. I mean, I guess they're trying to milk The Last Ride a little bit longer, but meh. And it was like, oh, until the next time, until more stories are told. You're not going to tell more stories. You're not going to tell more stories. We're not going to hear more of these. That's probably going to be it. And The Undertaker has a long history in professional wrestling. 30 years in WWF alone, plus however many he had before then, probably closer to 35. Long history of Taker stories to draw from. A lot of them we've heard already. Some of either in the documentary, other Taker interviews, and now here. The ones that we haven't heard already, they're fine. They were amusing. Like, they were probably better with the people involved in them, but they didn't necessarily translate to a third person narration or telling of the story. It's fine. Check it out. If you got an extra 20 minutes to kill and you want to throw it on in the background, it's not, oh my God, I need to see this. It's not like the rest of the Undertaker documentary. It's again, a DVD extra. And again, this video is going longer than the whole extra did. So, we're going to end it here. I'm going to ask you to like, share, and subscribe, and to go down there in the comments section and let me know, did you see the DVD extra here that we're talking about? What did you think of it? Were there some stories that you hadn't heard? Were there some stories that you have heard before but got a different take of them? Do you believe Bruce Pritchard when he says anything? The answer to that should be no. Like, share, subscribe. Do me a favor, patreon.com/surreal469, patreon.com/surreal469. Helps keep the lights on at the party, helps keep the drinks flowing at the party. And party people, that, unlike flicking a lit match into your friend's hair, ain't bad. Cheers.